I didn't want to miss bro.
Dude,
Anyway, yeah,
I truck my 5.3 that
So I
Chevy
got the half dozen Pfizer.
with regular gas. I get
Didn't
No, I think that's a good idea.
The next day, I'm in
dude, not even. If I'm pulling
I've
something,
got a deal, I've got a gold,
forget it.
I've got a glass, that's glass that's got gold running through it, it was hand blown.
like, I'll try to drive. I tried to.
Yeah.
I stopped in. I put like $40 in. That'll get me to the property.
Okay, we're gonna get started in 1 minute. So everybody out there in the crowd, check your phone.
I know my mom didn't have it. I was going to have some.
We'll just have to figure it out.
Oh, God, I thought you were kidding me. Oh, Joycey.
I get paid extra for thinking.
I can't even breathe through this thing.
Found my glasses and still can't see.
Okay, it's 6 o'clock. Today is Monday, November 15th, 2021. This is Barberton City Council. Tonight is a committee of the whole meeting. Before we go into that meeting, we will have individual committee meetings. We have 5 reports tonight. First up on the list is Environmental Health and Social Services with Mr. Jaber.
Thought it was 3.
It doesn't matter what order we go in.
Really?
Okay,
Okay.
well, our papers are messed up then.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Out of order.
Not mine, mine are always out of order, so.
Thank you, Mr. President. Environmental Health and Social Services, meeting November 15th at 6 o'clock, council chambers. All members are present. Council members also present and noted. We have no new requests for legislation. Open this up for miscellaneous discussion. Anyone? Seeing none, motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Mr. Griffin. And Mr. Hyde. And sir, we adjourned at 6:01. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Streets, Sidewalks, and Lighting.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to bring to order Street, Sidewalk, and Lighting. It's November 15th, 2021. It's 6:01 PM, and we're here in the council chambers. All committee members are present, all council members are present, and guests noted on my sheet. Topics of discussion, we have no request for legislation today. Miscellaneous discussion, I do have just a couple things I want to share. Got an update from Mr. Tracy today about the 2021 road program. He said that the program's winding down and utility adjustments are being completed, and he expects to be completed by tomorrow for the 2021 road program. The second thing is the A-match projects are complete with the exception of manhole cover at the intersection of Barber Road and Norton Avenue, and Carvo Construction is going to be looking at that here shortly. The third thing I have here is the first real snowfall fell yesterday. Wasn't too significant, but we did have crews out that put out about 12 tons of salt. We currently have 5 trucks set up for salting and plowing right now, with the rest of the trucks set up for leaf collection. But the setups that we currently have on our trucks allow for a quick switch over if we have a heavy snow event. And the fourth thing, I just want to tap on this just really fast so everybody is aware. I reached out to Mr. Tracy and the mayor about some concerns with Fifth Street and the work, and the city's trying to meet and coordinate a meeting with the contractor Roland and the subcontractor Shelley, hopefully sometime this week, to discuss some of the issues, so we should have some more input from that. I don't have any other miscellaneous discussion. Is there anything from the committee?
No.
Anything from council members? Mr. Tracy, did I tap on just everything? We're good?
Fine job, Councilman.
Anything you wanted to share? Anything else? All right. Seeing nothing, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion,
Motion made by Mrs. Angeloff
and I will second it.
and seconded by Mrs. Fry. Street, sidewalk, and lighting is adjourned at 6:03 PM.
Okay, thank you. Next up is planning, annexation, and codes. Mrs. Angela.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to bring the order of the Planning, Annexation, and Codes Committee meeting. It is 6:05 PM. We're in the council chambers. All members are present. All council members are present, and guests as noted on my sheet. We have no new legislation. We do have two pieces of pending legislation. Ordinance 123, 2021, amending the Barberton Codified Ordinance, Chapter 1444, Permits and Fees. It's an ordinance amending Section 1444.15, General Permits, and declaring an emergency. Any comments? Any questions regarding this? I think we added tents to that code, and this is to keep us, remain with compliance and offset related expenses, operating expenses. Second, and that will be a second reading next week on the 22nd. Next, I have a resolution number 124, 2021. It's titled Various Types of Businesses Moratorium. A resolution imposing a moratorium until the adoption of a new development code on the issuing of zoning permits for used car lots, mini warehouse, limited indoor storage, and dollar stores within the city of Barberton, with the exception of permitting mini warehouses within industrial uses, I-1, I-2, I-3, or IU zoning districts. I think Mr. Trevor explained that. Mr. Hunt explained that the Planning Commission recommends to the city to adopt a new development code when we have this in conjunction with the new development code. And we will be having a meeting Wednesday going over the bids that was submitted. The first bids that were submitted were not in CDBG funds, so we have to redo that so we can use CDBG funds. So that took a little bit of time in doing that. So is there any questions, comments, or concerns regarding that request? And that will be a second reading next week. Mr. Heidig?
Thank you, Chair. I know at one point it was discussed putting an actual date on was instead of just until that. Is that any traction, or are we sticking with that?
That will have to, Planning Commission will have to look at that, and that will be probably Wednesday that they will make that decision, because it is the commission. So that will be something that, what they decide to do, then I can bring back to council.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, concerns? No? Any miscellaneous?
Chairperson.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Mr. Tracy?
Miscellaneous discussion.
Okay.
A couple weeks ago, when I introduced legislation for the fees, Councilwoman DeBevick asked about the company or the individual who's going to be performing the electronic plan examinations. And that company is called Sixmo. It's S-I-X-M-O, an engineering firm out of Cleveland. I did inquire with some accountants about doing our plan examinations electronically, because they do have master plan examiners on staff, and they were concerned that they may not be able to meet our criteria as far as the timelines of our projects. And they have actually contracted out with Sixmo before as well. So we're going to look at using them as the electronic plan examiner.
As the electronic
Plan examiner.
Yeah.
Yeah, so any plans that come in electronically that
Sixmo will
we
look
can
at.
forward over to Sixmo to start that process.
Okay. Very good. Any other questions? concerns? Any other miscellaneous from the committee? Yes, go ahead.
I just want to thank Mr. Tracy for bringing that answer back. Thank you.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Mrs. Coburn? do
And
I
I'll
have a
second.
Mr. Greer, and we are adjourned at 6:09 PM. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Public Welfare and Safety with Mrs. DeBevick.
It's still recorded.
I'd like to bring to order the special Public Welfare and Safety Committee meeting. It's Monday, November 15th at 6:08 PM here in council chambers. All members of the committee are present, as well as all council members and all others noted. We have, for all of you, just as a recap, last week we passed a piece of legislation, ordinance number 117, 2021, and it was missing the emergency wording. So we have to amend that piece of legislation if we would like to pass it with emergency wording. So it was the piece of legislation with regard to the American Rescue Plan grant fund being used for the safety forces. Premium pay. So I need a motion to invoke Council Rule 702 to suspend Council Rule 302. This is because of this COW 10-day rule.
I'll make a motion to invoke Council Rule 702 to suspend Council Rule 302.
Motion made by Mr. Greer. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion to suspend Council Rule 302.
Second by Mr. Griffin. All in favor?
Aye.
I also need a motion to invoke Council Rule 702 to suspend Council Rule 304. It's a late request to be added to the agenda.
I'll make a motion to invoke Council Rule 702 to suspend Council Rule 304.
Okay, do I have a second?
I second the motion to suspend Council Rule 304.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we will have a special legislative meeting this evening to vote on this piece of legislation. I also now need a motion to call for the piece of legislation to amend ordinance number 117, 2021, adding emergency language.
I will make a motion to call for this amendment.
Motion made by Mr. Greer. Do I have a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Mr. Griffin. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Griffin,
I'll second.
second by Mr. Greer. We are adjourned at 6:09.
12,
Oh, 6.
according to that.
Okay. 6:12.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, last but not least is Finance and Personnel, Mrs. Fry.
I did hit stop because I didn't know who was next.
That's fine. I usually stop it anyway.
All you have to do is hit record.
Yeah. I'm making sure it's moving.
We could have had it, but it doesn't.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight is Monday, November the 15th. We are in council chambers, and the time is 6:13 PM. And I am bringing to order the Finance and Personnel Committee meeting. All members of the committee are present, as well as all council members and guests as noted on my agenda. The first piece of legislation that has been requested is a letter from Mayor Judge requesting legislation acknowledging and giving recognition to the 2021 Barberton football team. Does anyone have any comments about this piece of legislation? Hearing none, do I have a motion to call for this? Mr. Medges, do I have a second? Mrs. Angela? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. The next request for legislation is a letter from Councilwoman at Large, Carla DeBevick, requesting legislation to implement a bidding requirement for all professional services over $10,000. And since this request is from Mrs. DeBevick and she is also on the committee, I would like for her to present. And she has given us all some handouts, so you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So I provided, we received this quite a few years ago. It's the thicker handout. It's the spending flow chart for the city of Barberton. And so I passed it out for everybody just to review, because every once in a while I just like to look back at it and review. So in particular, what I'm looking at is on page 2 in the upper right-hand corner, where it talks about how much is it and the requirements and the exceptions. So here it says in purple, the exception to the quote and bid requirement are professional services, state purchasing, sole supplier, and emergency. So how am I buying it, essentially? So what I have proposed, I've also passed out what the city of Barberton, and these are just in ordinances, so these would just be amounts where it was proposed, I believe, to pay over $50,000. We didn't necessarily pay over $50,000, but there was legislation that could be over $50,000, because a lot of our legislation for professional services are, they say not to exceed or not in excess of. So you have here a list of, from 2016 to 2020, some of the non-professional, I'm sorry, the non-bid professional services that the city of Barberton has paid for. In 2016, it was $1.7 million, 2017, $1.6 million, 2018, $2.2 million, 2019, $1.3, 2020, $1.7, and as of this week, there's nothing on the Ohio checkbook, and I didn't ask Mr. Flaker to go through that for me. So I also passed out a couple of talking points. I think this is important for a few reasons. I think that the voters spoke loud and clear in 2019 when they voted not to do away with the engineer in the charter. It went on the ballot, and the voters said yes, they indeed wanted to keep engineering in the charter. I think that this is a difficult plan, but a good plan. I think that I've listed some suggested discussions that would make this feasible. One of them would be an effective beginning July 1st, 2022, to allow 6 months of preparation. The second one, which would occur after I'm on city council, but I think that for this to work, we would have to possibly increase the salary for engineer to assist in hiring, and possibly the addition of a project manager position, all of which I think are going to be a lot more cost effective than what we're spending, because I mean, this isn't all of the professional non-bid services. This is just what came through as ordinances. So if it's in the budget, it's not coming to us. So that's pretty much where I'm at. That's what I have. And I would encourage anybody that would like to add anything. I also want to, Mrs. Angeloff did send an email to me with some concerns regarding the process for bidding. And I do have that. It does have to be put in the newspaper. It says for 2 weeks. One of the weeks. It can be just on the online, it doesn't have to be published. And it's pretty much what we're doing for our regular bidded work. You know, the time and place where the bids are going to be open have to be opened. And so if anybody wants that information, I have it.
I would like for someone that really has a lot to do with professional services, like, I don't know if Mr. Tracy could weigh in on this regarding how this would slow down the process.
Yeah, Ms. Doherty.
That's her hand up.
Oh, Beth is over here.
I beg your pardon, oh, Beth.
Oh,
has her
I
hand
will
up.
say, I think another part of this, actually, I didn't mention it, is I would like to, I did, in my letter, provide an exception, and that was for legal. Because I think that that's important. When you need a lawyer, you need a lawyer
But the
today.
exception is for the law department, not for legal.
Not for legal.
So that's one question. My other question is, how did we come up with the $10,000 mark?
So that's a discussion point. I mean, I just, you know, I just chose that number. I think that we need to be responsible with the citizens' money, and I think that isn't always happening. And so, I mean, that's all up for discussion. I chose $10,000 because
We absolutely should be responsible with the citizens' money. I could not agree with you more. As HR Safety Director, we have several professional services that we use. One is the labor attorneys that we pay for out of our budget. Most years it exceeds that $10,000 mark, and we've had a great relationship and great success with Retzel and Andrus. SUMA Corporate Health is our current go-to for physicals, drug testing, all kinds of things. And I don't know that we've hit 10,000, but I have to believe that we're close, if not over, especially this year because Dr. Forsyth's office is no longer in play. So we use SUMA Corporate Health or People Check for those things. I know in combination, it would definitely go over 10,000. NFP is our current insurance broker, and that's roughly $35,000 a year, and they have done a really good job for us and have brokered medical prescription benefits that have drastic is probably too big of a word, but has reduced our cost by quite a bit year over year since I've been here. And I just wanted to say that it would be difficult to go out for bid every year for these professional services that we've been using, most of which, not all, since I got here and have had really good success.
So what I'll say is that, for example, some of the legislation, I think NFP was one of them, it was for multiple years, the legislation that we passed.
But it was for a dollar amount exceeding 10,000 each year.
Right. So they wouldn't, I mean, I would think that the specs would be, I don't know, I think we're just asking for, I'm asking for accountability. That's, you know, if we feel, if how other council members feel, if you feel 25,000 is fair. As it stands now, 50,000 I think is too high. We don't have to go out to bid for professional services. And we can see what that's cost us over the course of.
If I may, Mrs. DeBevick, I think accountability, as far as cost goes, is in the history of the costs and the successes that we've had. And, I mean, I think it's right there in black and white. I think you can see it on spreadsheets that we've been successful. And the cost of, just for example, NFP, I have to take this off, it's really hard to speak.
That's okay.
For example, NFP, they've done great work in brokering the insurance companies that we use. So I don't know if that would be a separate professional service like Medical Mutual, or would it all still go under NFP? Because we sign off on Medical Mutual. So if we had to go out, and they do that for us, they go out for bid. It's not for bid, but they go out for proposals for us. That's what they do. That's what we pay NFP to do.
So if I might, so that this is the one area that I was not positive about. So NFP in particular. It's ironic that you brought that up, because I thought that we contracted through the county, or we joined with the county.
NFP brokered that deal with the county, so we also pay the county an administrative fee.
Right.
So, and that's where our savings has been by joining that consortium. So technically, I'm only guessing, each would be considered a professional service, whereas now we go through NFP. And then we sign off with both the county and Medical Mutual and any other benefit that we have.
So I will tell you that I left out, when I was looking at anything that was with the county, I did not.
It's a medical benefit consortium. I haven't looked into it, but I would imagine there's probably 40 or 50 of them in the state that we could look into. I'm just totally guessing.
Right.
So that if we had to do that, then that would, it just, and all these contracts end at a particular time, so, and then you only have so many days to exit out or to renegotiate. And our bid process, I think, is pretty lengthy. I haven't had to do bidding, I don't think, for any professional service since I've been here.
Well, you don't have to, by virtue of Ohio Revised Code, you don't
Right.
have to. That's
So-
the problem.
Well, I'm telling you, I don't know,
Right.
I'm not familiar with the process. That would be
Right.
great. But I do think it's a lengthy process that would probably back into open enrollment and all the other contracts that we have. So it's just a concern of mine.
So, right, absolutely, and that's why I wanted to have this conversation in a public forum, because I'm hoping that Mrs. Miller can weigh in on those areas. The one area that I felt certain was the legal area, just because when you need a lawyer, you need it now, so.
Yeah, and when you need a backhoe fixed, you need it now too. So it's just.
But so if it's an emergency, if it's an emergency, that was also in there.
Okay. All right, and the way it was written was legal, or law department, not legal
Okay,
services.
so then if we need to change that would just be an oversight on my
No,
behalf,
that's
so.
okay. I'm just telling you what my impressions are of this.
Right.
So,
Awesome, thank you for your input, I
Thank
really
you,
appreciate it.
Mrs. Doherty, and I'm sorry I didn't call on you, forgetting that you had professional
Oh, no, that's
services
okay.
for all
That's all right.
of the things that you do in your office. So did anybody else want to weigh in on that? Mr. Heidick?
Thank you, Chair. Director Doherty, with the NFP one, so they do the shopping for us for that?
Yes, they do.
With NFP, are there other companies like NFP?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know if they fell under sole provider or anything like that. I'm not keen on insurances.
Well, they could fall under sole provider if they have specs that other companies don't.
Well, that's where I see in this chart here that sole supplier would most likely be exempted from this, wouldn't it?
So.
If I'm reading this chart correctly, I may not be, but.
Yes. Sorry, I didn't pull up the letter that I sent.
I have a question for you, Beth. The NFP, which you said is also somebody that deals with Summit County and is tied to our health care with that particular deal.
Yes.
If you went with a different supplier, you would not have the partnership with Summit County, correct?
I don't know that that's correct. I don't know
Okay.
if they have other brokers involved. They may very well have, but at this point, if I'm forced to answer that question, I would say no, the NFP is the only one, but I am not 100% on that.
Okay, I just wanted to point that out in case that was one of the situations. Mrs. Angela?
Thank you. First, $10,000. It just threw out $10,000. Our $10,000, you can't hardly buy anything for, and if you have to go out to bid for that amount, it's just insane, because if anybody knows the bidding, it takes a long time to bid that. It's money, it's hours that you're paying, and then where would you come up with a emergency repair? How would you how would you categorize, this is an emergency, so therefore you don't have to go out for that?
So I think we already do
There's a lot
that.
of different emergencies. Could be, cars, it could be chemicals for utilities, it could be a blow-up of a sewer, it could be, where we're down on asphalt and say the temperature is a little bit higher now, we can get hot asphalt, but we can't get it if we have to go out to bid if it's $10,000. Where do you draw the line at the emergency and $10,000? You talk about, Mr. Jaber was saying that on his Facebook that certain council members are slowing down the process of the city. This, in my opinion, would really, really slow the progress of the city, because you're going from $50,000 to $10,000. $10,000. I mean, you can't even, you buy a car for $50,000. I mean, $10,000 is like change.
So what I'm going to say is you're focusing solely on the number. The thing is we don't even have to bid over 50,000. They just choose who they want for professional services without bid.
Who's they?
The administration, whoever chooses.
So we are micromanaging the administration. We are questioning their expertise and what they do, 40, 50 hours a week. That's what we're doing here on council?
I'm representing the citizens, and this is something that citizens asked of me.
I have never heard of this before, and I've never had anybody question anything of that sort. I mean, if it's something very far-fetched, okay, but this, to me, is not kosher. It's not what we do here. And to have people think that we don't have trust in our administration and our department heads that have 40-year service, and that's disheartening to me. I don't want somebody coming up and saying that, because we have to watch what they do, because, they might, cheat or something? We have checks and balances. We answer the state of Ohio. They come in and they rip us apart. Every purchase order, everything that we do. So it's not like they're hiding or we're hiding anything. And I'm not sticking up for the administration. I don't always agree with them either. I've never always agreed with them, but I'm just saying, I don't understand, you said just 10,000.
So I said that number was what this discussion was supposed to be about. It's more about the fact that why would we not get the best price that we can get for our citizens?
Who says we don't get the best price? Who says we don't?
How do we have something on paper that shows we get the best price? Because I haven't seen anything on paper. It's a non-bid professional service.
It's administration. It's not legislation. It's not what city council does. We answer to our constituents. If one of my constituents say, well, I think that's a ridiculous amount of money that you did this or you did this, I'd say, call the mayor or call the service director. I do not feel that we should sit here and second guess, third guess, fourth guess what the administration is doing. I think we're all citizens of Barberton. We all vote. We were voted on by our constituents. I have never had a constituent call me and tell me, that's ridiculous that you paid X amount of dollars for chemicals or cars or anything like that. What they're worried about is their property, their neighbors, my street. I had flooding. That's what they're concerned about. Like I said before, we have checks and balances. Jeremy can tell you, that is not easy having that state come in and audit you. And they rip everything apart. I have even had to show them something that was like, are you crazy? I gotta show you this. They look at that stuff and they ding us if something's wrong. And we have been, the city of Barberton for many, many years has always had an A+ credit rating. The reason for that is because the state audits us. And everything is open book. And I just feel that if any of my constituents have a problem with going out to bid for something or looking at something that's $12,000, that is not legislation. That is not what I do. They can go and they can talk to the service director, or I can talk to the service director or the mayor to get this, or to get this. I think it is, in concept on paper, it looks good, but I think it will definitely set the city back. It will take longer to get projects done. If I'm wrong, tell me. I don't know.
Mr. Tracy wanted to speak, but I just wanted to clear something up here in your letter. You said under the Ohio Revised Code, competitive bidding is not required.
Correct.
So
That's what we're using, is Ohio Revised Code.
Right. So therefore, if it's not required, I don't know why we would be setting a limit. But I am in agreement that it'll slow us down. And also, the bid process is an expense as well.
Yes, it's very
So
expensive.
therefore, when you go out to bid and you run ads in the paper and you have to go through this bid process, you have to have somebody that manages the bid. I think that's going to add additional expenses to something that we really don't have to do as per the Ohio Revised Code. But Mr. Tracy, I don't know much about professional services. Mr. Tracy does, and he had his hand up, so maybe he can enlighten us with more information about how this all works, how much it would add to the cost of the projects, how it would slow us down, how much time is necessary to do all this bidding. And as Mrs. Doherty brought up, it can even cause us to lose contracts for health care and things of that nature, which, is something that you really don't want to get involved in, because they have dates that are, end dates for your coverage, and you don't want to be messing around with bidding when people's health care is on the line. So, Mr. Tracy, would you be willing to, you had your hand up, so whatever it is you wanted to say, please
Say it.
let us
Yeah.
know.
So a couple of things. One is, us as the administration, we operate in the utmost integrity. Everything we do is vetted. So we don't just make decisions and take things lightly. So every project I've been involved in over the last 7 years, no one's just thrown out a professional services and thrown $20,000 out there and just said, just use them. That's never happened. So I want to make sure that there's not this misconception that anything between $10,000 and $50,000, we just pick whoever we want and move on. Because that's not how we operate. I'll go back to the Hopkins Avenue water main. If you were just to bid that out for professional services, you're stuck with the lowest price, even if it's not the best. It always says lowest and best, but to just take the best and not the lowest, a lot of times can put you in a difficult position from a legal standpoint. So what we did, we met with people on site on Hopkins Avenue. We met OHM advisors, Burgess and Nyepel. We talked to GPD in person because we had a contract with them. And we vetted those companies to see who would be the best for the project. In the end, we selected Burgess and Nyepel for that project because of the water projects they were doing in the area that were consistent with what we were doing. They were also familiar with the lead and copper rules that were going in place at that time. So they were very helpful during that project, making sure that we were compliant in every way. If we were just to bid that project out, we may have gotten another individual who wasn't as knowledgeable about the new lead and copper rules, and maybe it would have been more difficult and ended up costing us more money in the long run. For the Meriwether foam water main we're working on right now, we vetted AECom, OHM, and GPD. We selected OHM. We haven't used them before in my tenure with the city. They have experience with easements and working with railways because we're working around ABC's railroad. So throughout our processes, we did some virtual interviews with them, and we selected OHM for that project based on their experience and their specialized skills, which is exactly what professional services are. This year, I contracted with a company called Pavement Management Group to do a full PCI score on all the roads in the city. And they take videos of all the roads in the city. Pavement Management Group is also used by AMETS, City of Green, Hudson, and some other places. But I didn't just choose them because that's some of their customers. I also talked to Robotics and how the video and the general foreman of the street department and the street superintendent were both in the meeting. We also talked to another company called Public Works One, who was also part of iWork, which is a company that we use in the building department. Logistically, it sounds like it makes sense. They use Public Works One because we already use some of their software in other part of the city. But after talking to these individuals and what most meets our needs, the prices were all very similar. We chose to go with payment management group. Number one, because they already have PCI scoring for a number of the roads in the city because AMS uses them, but also the platform that they use and the information we're getting it was exactly what we're looking for. Kind of goes back to the police cars, which isn't a professional service, but what Norton was getting for their bid didn't meet the needs of what our department was doing. The building department, the plans examinations. The plans examinations, we would have to go to bid then, at that point, if it's over $10,000 to do plan examinations. When it's a professional service, it takes a specialized certificate. There's only a number of them in the state, and you have to use that service per Ohio Building Code. There's really no reason to bid it out. There's only so many that you can at your disposal. That would go with the inspectors as well. So in the past, we haven't had inspectors make over 10,000 because there hasn't been quite as much development going on. But now with the Barberton Brookside, the Cider Ridge, the New Haven developments, some of these inspectors they might eclipse the $10,000 mark. At that point, we're going to have to bid that out. So now we're looking at another bid for something. When those are just hard to find. I mean, that's why we contracted with the county as backup inspectors, because you just don't know if you're going to have an inspector one day when you need one. The fire station upgrades, we're doing that right now. Those likely are not going to exceed $50,000, but they will exceed $10,000. The mayor, myself, the safety director, the fire chief, we all sit in a room with these people and look at their proposals and go over them and figure out who's the best one. If someone's $3,000 more than the other one, it still might make sense because they're going to give us the services that we think we need for this department and for this project. Another one is the wastewater plant. We were in here a few months ago discussing the $361,000 for the construction and engineering services for that project. That project cost $13,000 just to bid it. So you would have to bid the project. That part of it doesn't make any sense. So, our GIS software. So we use we have a GIS software for water, sewer, storm, roads. It has, there's tons of attributes on this thing. It's $12,000 a year. We got approved by council for that a few years ago, but it was $12,000, so we wouldn't have had to. We did it knowing that we'd probably go on past the 5-year period, but we didn't just select them. We looked at Dude Solutions, CityWorks, iWork, and IMGIS. So it's a professional service, but we made sure that we vetted and that their product is what was going to meet our needs. And in the end, their product was simple enough that everyone in our staff and arrangement could use it. So there's another example of just the work we put into these things. When if we were just to bid it, we're going to get stuck with whoever has the lowest bid, and it doesn't always necessarily meet your needs. So that's that's some of the things to keep in mind when you're considering that $10,000 to $50,000 amount where professional services could fall. The state has a rule in place for a reason. I'm not going to sit here and tell you what the reason is, but I'm sure when they put that number in there, it was vetted by a number of attorneys and lawyers, and they figured that this is probably a good number for people to operate by. So, I'm not going to dispute that number. If you guys want to change the number, it's up to you. But I can tell you that there's nothing that this administration does that isn't thoroughly researched before the decision is made. And if you bid everything out, sometimes the bid can be a disadvantage because you're going to end up with someone who potentially maybe you didn't want, although you might get a good price. And sometimes that price difference is worth it. Sometimes it's not. That's it.
The mayor had his hand up.
Yeah, as Greg stated and Councilman DeBevick stated, the state has a threshold of 50,000. I'm not aware of any community our size with our operations that does not stay at that threshold. So I'm not sure of any community that's lower than that. We have not been dinged for any mismanagement by the state auditors or independent auditors or anything like that. There is a process to approve professional services. That was not brought up at all, which is disheartening. Through Board of Control, the mayor, the law director, and the finance director meet, approve or disapprove the professional services, every one of them. And there's times when we disapprove them, there's times when we ask for more information, and there's times when, you know, we bring the department head and talk to them about things. So there is a mechanism in place. You know, I have a few examples here. Outside of the legal realm, $11,600 for promotional exam for police, sergeant, lieutenant. We have to bid that out. I don't know if that would be a sole supplier. It's listed as a professional service. So now you're adding 30, maybe even 45 days to a bid process, plus paying someone to put the bid together to make sure all the checks and balances and legalities are taken care of, just to put on a test, which now the hiring process is that much longer. Greg brought up some of the, and Mr. Tracy brought up some of the things in the building department. EMS supplies at times can be a professional service. Here's one for $18,000. One out of the law department, but it's not a legal fee. It's $9,650, and I realize that's under the $10,000 threshold. That's the traveler's insurance. I mean, based on the proposal, it can only go to the law department for legal as through the discussion through legal fees. Well, this isn't a legal fee. There's no way you can bid a payment to traveler's insurance, most likely for a claim. So, you know, I don't think that this is a good idea. I think we meet all the requirements for the ORC. We have all the checks and balances in place. It's been like this for forever, as far as I can remember. It's my 10th year as mayor, and I spent 8 years on city council, and it was that way before I came on board. So we're doing everything above board. You guys must not realize how we look for the best and inexpensive contractor or product out there, you know, because we know that we're pinching pennies, but we've got to put out a good product or service for the residents. So we definitely do our due diligence.
This is bad.
Thank you. Mr. Tracy, thank you. So essentially, you are, you're doing similar work to a bid process. We just aren't seeing that process.
But we're also not stuck with a company that would potentially not meet what the certain skills of that project may be.
And also, I think I think we're all torn or thrown off by the $10,000 number. Perhaps I should have left that out, because what I'm saying is that we don't have to bid anything that's a professional service. So if you look at the sheet that I handed out, to CT Consultants in 2016 in professional services, we paid them $376,709. That is not $10,000, and that's not bid. That doesn't have to be bid. It has nothing to do with the $50,000. It's just that anything over $50,000 has to be bid, and that's just for bidding, period. The exception to the rule is professional services, and that's what's important to understand. That even if we left it at $50,000, then that work would have to be bid, because we spent $376,709 with them. So even if we left it at $50,000, it doesn't matter. Over $50,000, it's not bid. Nothing is bid. No professional services are bid at this point.
I wanted to ask, though, that would be per job, and we went to them for a lot, so that's not like we went with one job and it was $300 and some thousand.
Right.
Yeah.
That was a number of different projects, so.
Right.
At the time, maybe most of them were under 50, but Mr. Tracy has more comments.
So for instance, like the CT Consultants, you know, CT has done a lot of work in the city over the years, but they're also doing phases of our wastewater plant, so phases of projects. But with that $300 and X that she was mentioning is the grants that they've got. So we get 90% grants for $3 million projects and 60% grants for $2 million projects. I mean, the money they're getting us far outweighs the cost of the professional services. So the institutional knowledge they have, that you know, since they've been working on certain pieces, and if they're the ones that are filling out the grant, getting us the money, helping us through the process, I don't want people to lose sight of the fact that although it's a large number, we're saving so much more on the other side with the grant funding, and the fact that we don't have to present them with all this information about our facilities and get them up to speed about everything that's happening and what happened here 20 years ago, what happened here 15 years ago, this is what we did 5 years ago, all those things already in place. So as long as they continue to get you the grant funding, it's kind of a no-brainer.
Mr. Heidi? Oh, I'm sorry,
Counselor.
Mrs. Coburn, I'm sorry.
Having been on utilities since I came on council, we discussed many of these CT consultants' fees in our committees, which you were in another committee and weren't there, but they were openly discussed every time we started a project. We didn't bid on it, we didn't vote on them, but they were openly discussed every time in utilities.
Yeah, I've been
We
on
always
utilities for
discussed
quite a while.
the different
And
amounts.
that's where probably a lot of the professional services come from water and sewage. But Mr. Heidick, you had a question?
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I have 4, because I was just writing down as I was listening there. Number 1, when we were talking about the insurance and things going out, my question would be, don't we know the end date? So theoretically, we know when certain things expire, that we should be looking early. Let's say this were to pass, we would have to look earlier. That's just a thought in my head here. And please correct me if I'm wrong with any of this. My second one is when we were talking about, Director Tracy was talking about with the lead rules and whatnot with certain things. If we were putting the bid together, don't we write the specs for what we need? My example here would be with the Oriana House ordinances that we passed. There's nobody else that can provide the services that we need, so therefore we end up contracting with them. Well, theoretically, if what we needed was in the bid, certain companies that, yeah, might be cheaper, couldn't make the nut anyway. Another question I'd written down here was, a lot of things do evolve and things change. We've changed what Councilor Jaber had brought before about scrapping cars to auctioning cars, which did seem to work. That's just an example here. But my last question, and Mr. Mayor, you could help me out on this one. Because of something like this, if this were to pass, I know you've mentioned quite a few times the position of project manager. Do you have what kind of qualifications that position would take? Salary, step grade? Do you have any more information? If this position were created, would this be a position that could handle something like this? And the last thing I say is the 10,000, I don't see why that couldn't be 20,000. 10 does seem awful low, but 20 or even 25 at maximum, because there are some things that just fall under that. If we need, I see one of them here back in 16, environmental design group was $1,700. Obviously there are things that are going to be cheaper that we just need on the fly. So, and as the examples from the administration, something that's $12,000, yeah, that's going to be a nightmare. So I would think 20 would be, if we were considering this, 20 would be a better number. But those were things just in my head as all these conversations were going. And if you allow, Chair, if the mayor would like to explain the project manager position, if that position, if created, could handle a system like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
So we've worked on the project manager position for a while. Like I said last week or the week before, we didn't bring it to council. I don't think that they would be able to handle a position like this, or these duties, because a job specs or a bid book for a wastewater treatment plant upgrade is way different than economic development, or way different than a park renovation bid specs. There's people that focus on these things, and a lot of these firms, as Mr. Tracy brought up, they have lobbyists for themselves down in DC. They know what grants are available. They know how to write some of those grants. They know how, that we don't have that expertise. So one person in a position would never be able to do what is needed to pull off the bid specs, to run everything. We're running a tight ship, skeleton crew, basically. When one person's out, that work typically is not getting done.
Did he answer your question, Mr. Heidick?
Yes, and if I may, I just have one more, just going off something that you said there, if I may.
Go ahead.
Okay. The wastewater treatment plant, things like that that are done in phases, could that theoretically be bid as one thing, as in this company will handle, company X in the bidding process will handle all phases until this job is complete? Counselor Coburn, you would know more about the wastewater treatment plant type things, if phases come unexpectedly or if there is a scheduled.
I'm going to defer to Mr. Tracy because he worked there, but I believe that it's not always the same company that does the entire job, is it?
So, yeah, this would be a question for Mr. Weaver, because he's not here.
Right.
So,
That's,
as far as the wastewater plant goes, I mean, that's a different animal. So
Right.
that plant has been getting continuous upgrades for the last 15 years. And the reason that CT has always been involved is because they were involved with step one. And then, so they, at that point, they have the institutional knowledge, they have the grants, they continue to get more grants, so they continue to get the work. To just, there could have been something that was done that during the process that maybe wasn't satisfactory, and we wouldn't want to lock ourselves in to that from day one over a 15-year project or something. So I think the having that, having those individuals and rehiring them under contract for each phase is nice. In case for some reason, over that long period of time, there's something that is unsatisfactory and you would like, to part ways. If you go under a contract with somebody over, and say they're going to do all 5 phases of this project over a long period of time, then now you're locked into a contract. So I don't know if that's the best way to approach it. And maybe I'm misunderstanding the question.
no, you answered that. Thank you, I
It is
appreciate
my-
that.
I'm sorry, it is my understanding that what is going on at the wastewater treatment plant, and, it's 3A, 2A, all the different phases, that was done, and as Greg just alluded to, we would have to talk to Mr. Weaver. But it is my understanding, because I have been on utilities for several years.
Right.
And it is my understanding that it is broken down into those phases so that we could afford it. So that this is, how many millions of dollars does this upgrade cost,
Well,
Greg?
just this final phase is $5 million.
Right, just that phase of it. So it was a huge amount of money. And because of Mr. Weaver's expertise, he broke it down so that we would have the opportunity to get grants and that we would have the opportunity to pay down debt, if we had any debt, on the different phases instead of doing everything at
Right.
once.
Right, and that's what Dr. Tracy answered for me, is if, let's say, CT Consultants, we said, okay, you're going to handle all phases, and that's what he broke down, that if in the middle it's
We can
no longer
part ways.
satisfactory, we can switch. But that's what I was getting at there, is if we do a whole or split, and not necessarily do the whole all at once, I'm saying.
And to your point about healthcare, yes, we know when it ends, but there is, just like this sign-up that we're going through now, all of us that are like on Medicare or whatever, there's a window where you have to sign up. You don't get the new changes until October or November, so you really don't know what the prices are going to be. They don't set their prices years ahead of time for healthcare and that type of thing. And is Mrs. Doherty raising her hand? But anyway, yes, we could, but I can't see why, with all that we have on our plate, that we want to start complicating things further.
Let's just,
So, Mr. Mayor and Mrs. Doherty, whoever wants to go first.
Well, I'd be interested to see a breakdown of that $300,000 example from 2016 and see what projects make that up, because that could have been a multi-year project, some of it, I don't know. I wasn't given, whatever was handed out.
I apologize that you weren't here before council started. I have a copy for you.
The other thing is, this affects more than engineering services or legal services, software systems for police and fire. So instead of doing an annual agreement, now we have to go out to bid. And I've been meeting with the departments on their budget for 2022, going over what our professional services. So this would slow up every operation. So So when we talk about doing new things, like a skate park, if this passes, I'd say, hey, we're not gonna do a skate park in 2022, because we're gonna be, the length of time to get anything done is gonna be that much greater. So,
And Mrs. Doherty, and I'm sorry, I'll get you next, Joyce, I'm sorry. You can hit me if I don't.
No, that's okay.
Okay, Beth.
Our insurance broker, NFP, they start benchmarking from day one for the next year, and they track it against years previous. They don't have an idea of what it's going to cost until we get past that June 31st date of whatever year we're looking at. So in order to benchmark for the year ahead, they have to look at all the prior benchmarks, which are probably quarterly, I would imagine, I think they are anyway. So then they have to get to that June 31st date, they go to July 1, and then they start working on the benchmarking for the next year. Once they get there, yes, we do know when the contracts end for insurance, so they always end on December 31st, and the new one starts on January 1. And again, I'm not plugging NFP because they're my favorites. It's because they do a really good job for us. They're also very, if you talk about historical knowledge, they're familiar with our 4 union contracts, which is very important because we can't change benefits on a dime. We can't just do it that way. So if we bid something out to a different broker to go to a different, or even a different healthcare provider, which is what NFP does for a living, by the way, so it is a huge help for us. It's important that they understand our union contracts. You can't just say all of a sudden one day their copay for glasses is now $300 instead of $100. So those have to be taken into account as well. Can that be done? Of course it can be done, but it would tremendously slow up the entire process, and you'd have to start maybe even 18 months earlier with the benchmarking if you knew that we were going to have to go out to bid for not only our brokers, which is, they're the ones that look for our benefit providers, and I'm still unclear if that would be considered a professional service because we do sign, even though NFP vets them, we still have to sign the individual contracts with the life insurance, the medical benefits, the prescription benefits, and so on. So if each one of those are considered because of the dollar amount that we would be spending on the contract, if they're considered individual professional services, we're looking at a whole lot more than just a couple of weeks or even a couple of months of work that would need to be done in order to get that moving and rolling in the proper direction, as I understand it. But yes, the answer to your question is yes, we know. And I know you know this, but it happens every year at the same time. But the back work is done much, much earlier than that.
Now, Mrs.
Thank you.
Coburn, I'm sorry.
That's
I
okay.
kept-
At one point, we were putting membrane filters in the water treatment plant, and in the middle of that program, it was discovered that it was not going to work for us, and we were able to stop and just stop until we could find the right answer for the city of Barberton. And so that project, we do have the ability to stop and change directions, and we took all the membranes out and went back to sand. So that was 2 years ago, 4 years ago now, that we did that. So these contracts that we do, that one happened to be with, I forget, I see them all over town all the time, they work for us a lot, but we canceled that contract. We still deal with them, but that particular situation was canceled.
Thank you. That's the end of all my questions. Thank you for
Okay. Does
letting me go
anybody
that
else
long
have
on
any
them
more
there.
questions or comments? Okay. How does the committee feel about, I think from the comments that have been made, I don't think that they want it at the, in the current form. But
I brought it in the form, so that we could discuss it and, as we should on council floor and, obviously in there I didn't have a start date that is 7 months from now, which I think is important to at least, provide that. And I think that you need to look at the engineer and, possibly the addition of a project manager. Those were some talking points that I had. Like I said, for me, the 10,000 isn't a sticking number. It was just something that I threw out there. I think more importantly, it's that anything over 50,000 doesn't have to be bid. And I've pulled, if anybody would like to see them, I pulled all the ordinances and the amounts that they were for over the since 2016, but I thought I would bog you down with too much information, and it's a lot of money. It's a lot, and a lot of them half of them are over 50,000. So when you're awarding, when you're passing a piece of legislation for a professional service in the amount of $680,000, that's a lot of money, and we have to be cognizant of that. So this was a starting point. This was a conversation that I think needed to be had. I'm just one voice, so.
Mrs. Angela.
It is a lot of money. Everything's a lot of money. But the city has been on such a tight budget. Not only this administration, past administrations. So I feel that if they see a project that costs $1 million, we don't have it in the budget, we can't scrape up for that, we're going to have to go out to bid. The bidding process is having that 50,000, normally we do over 50,000, is to look at the different prices. You might have something that you think is going to cost $1 million, somebody else is going to say $3 million. The city has always been very frugal with their money because we don't have any money. We just don't have it. So I think if you're looking at, we're just going to go ahead and do this because we don't want to have to go through the paperwork. That's not the case. That's not the case with this administration, the last administration, or the other administration. You don't have that affordability that you can just go ahead and do it. You only have so much money. When that checking account is low, you only have so much money. And I just feel that this is something that would definitely set the city back. We would go back. We have ARP money coming in and everything. I mean, you want to set the city back, this would be that. And you have to be able to have some trust and some faith. If you feel you're uncomfortable with that, any one of us can make an appointment and sit down and go through it for hours. If you feel that that's too much money, go through it, If you want to ask for proposals, if they're going out for something and you want proposals, ask for proposals, because they do proposals, and they do bids, and they you just have to know how the operation of the city is. And I just feel that something like this is overstepping our boundaries because they know how much money they have in their budget. They know where that checkbook comes, so they know how much money they have. And let me tell you, they'll use it down to the very penny, but they will not go over that. So I am not for this legislation, changing it, or anything. I think it's going to, with the ARP money and the infrastructure money, hopefully, that's going to put us behind, because some of these projects are going to take a couple years, to get bids and to get consultants and everything of that sort. Nothing's done overnight. It's going to take a couple years.
The mayor had another comment.
One comment and one question. The first comment is, it was stated that the law department was excluded because when you need a lawyer, you need one now. That's not always the case. So I can think of examples that professional services have been used and it wasn't an emergency. And my question is, Councilwoman DeBevick, the list that you provided here of non-bid professional services.
Yes.
Can you tell me how many of these received quotes? Did the department take go out and get multiple quotes?
Well, I don't know, because as a city council person, we haven't been given those quotes.
But that would go through Board of Control, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Hyder.
Okay, my last one, I promise you. Don't call me again.
All right.
Okay, promise?
All right.
Okay.
I promise not to call on you,
All right.
too.
So, in 2020 on this list, it has paid for 1.7 million. My question is, and this is going to be rhetorical, so I don't expect anybody to be able to answer this because this is, again, rhetorical, but if a city engineer were to be put in step 9 in their first, and came in their first year, it would be about 72,000 for a salary. If a project manager was added, let's say at the same scale, that would be 144,000 in salaries. With roll-up, I'm just gonna say an even 200,000, just to play money. Am I close there? Just to play money. So my theoretical question here to think about is, if we spent 17.5, or 1.7 million, minus the 200,000, that's 1.5 million. Could those two positions have saved us any money off the 1.5 million? We're already spending the 1.7. We already spent that. Could the 200 between those combined positions, if they were changed and added, drag that number down to 1 million and save us 500,000? Again, this is rhetorical because this is all play money, but those are the things I think about. If an engineer was placed in step 9 and a project manager was created in the same spot, could they have saved any money off of there? And none of us can know because that's an impossible equation, but.
And
You got 3 hands.
Oh, gosh. Okay. I see Greg's first.
Okay, this is why I said, don't call me anymore after this one.
Okay, Greg.
So this is just
Mr. Tracy.
Mhm.
The only way to place an engineer at step 9 at the pay grade is a supermajority of council.
Right.
And 17,000 still, just being candid, that's not enough for it.
And that's first year on that.
Yeah.
So that's why I was just play moneying there.
Mrs.
Because
Sorry.
it's midterm, you have to get council's approval.
Mrs. Doherty?
I believe that's an engineering firm, correct? Not a person, right? So if that's an engineering firm, that would probably encompass all the mechanicals that they would need. I don't know what kind of schematic machines they have. I'm making it up because I don't know what they would be called. It would also include more than just one person with one discipline under engineering, which is a pretty broad term. We did, a few years back, we tried to we did interview a handful of engineers, and they all turned us down. They said, really, we wouldn't have wasted your time or ours because they were currently making double what we could pay them. So that is a big problem. When you need an engineer, that is a significant position that, if you want to go through the interview process, we could certainly do that, but we would probably still have to use an engineering firm, because you're going to get one type of an engineer with one type of discipline versus a firm that can get you what you need because you're under contract.
You had your hand up, but I have a question for you before you answer. With the, let's just say Akron, which is a much bigger city than ours, they do not have just one engineer, correct?
I would say they're in the teens.
I beg your pardon, in the teens?
13
And
to 19.
to add on to that question, do they go out to outside engineering firms when they are working on projects like this huge sewer project that they just had?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of an outlier, it's so big, but yeah, they go out and use the exact same number of engineers that we use, that everybody uses. So to kind of answer your question, I don't believe that those positions would save us any money in terms of this, nor would they be able to go out and get the grant money that we've received through these engineering firms. Mr. Tracy and I think it was last year, we had to present in front of ODOT for some safety funding. I don't know how many people were in there, 20, 30 people, and they saw the presentation. GPD prepped us, kind of like going into for a law case, a legal case. They prepped us, we knew what to say, when to say, what kind of questions they were going to ask. You would never have that type of preparedness from an internal staff. We just don't have that expertise. GPD does. So we were successful in getting that money, largely all of it because of GPD.
I'm going to ask Mrs. Angela. Mrs. Angela can speak, and then I think we should probably wrap up.
I just, and I apologize, the BOC Border Control, I just want to verify, I don't know how many of you know who's on the Border Control, and it's in the charter. You have the mayor, You have the law director, you have the finance director, and they look at the proposals, and they question it, they take a look at it. So that is how these get approved through the Board of Control, through the charter. So that's who sits on the Board of Control. I just thought maybe I should say that because I forgot about the Board of Control.
And
Okay.
Mrs. Frey, I just wanted to say that if you look at this flow chart, it will give you all the information that you need. It's all in here.
Okay, so I have a question for my committee. Does anyone feel comfortable bringing it out of committee, discussing it more, or? No?
I don't want to bring it up.
No.
So we aren't going to have any further discussion on it. It's just done.
Well, we're not bringing this out of.
It's not, I mean, it's
committee,
not set, we didn't come up with any resolution that anyone would agree on.
There is
I
a
mean,
draft in the packet, though, isn't there?
Yes, there's
I
a
beg your pardon?
draft. There's a draft in the packet, I think.
I know, but Mayor, I also passed out, and sorry, I didn't have one of these for you. It was just some talking points. So that we could spark some conversation and hopefully come to some sort of agreement to allow all of council to vote, but that's okay.
I think after what has been said by people that actually work with professional services and the fact that we use them in almost every area of the work that we do within the city, and the other factor that it is not even required by the Ohio Revised Code. Personally, now this is just my thought on this, I think it would slow things down. And as was mentioned several times tonight about the influx of money that we're getting from ARP and possibly the infrastructure bill, and we will hopefully have a lot of projects going forward, and it's going to be hard enough to secure people to do the work because everybody's getting money. It's not just like Barberton's getting money. So in order to be able to hire to do some of the projects that we so desperately need, I don't think that we should put a bidding requirement on professional services. But that's just my personal opinion. And if anybody else wants to weigh in and say what they feel about this, Mr. Greer?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mrs. DeBevick, for bringing this forward. I do think that this deserves some more attention. It might not call to the floor, but I would ask that it just stays on people's radar and the discussion continues. Mr. Heidick mentioned, and even Mrs. DeBevick, that maybe the $10,000 is a little low. But does it make sense to make it 20, 25? I've been going through the professional services on Open Checkbook, but I haven't had a chance to actually sit down to make sure that everything is in there. So it would allow me as another council person to learn more about it in depth and in detail. If it just at least stayed in committee or it stayed on the radar. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. So for now, if people want to discuss this in the future or have any other comments, I guess we can bring it up again. But going forward tonight, we're not going to bring it out of committee. The next piece of legislation in the Finance Committee was referred to us by Safety. And it is ordinance number 125, 2021, which is amending ordinance number 117, 2021. And this was due to the fact that emergency wording was not in the original 117, 2021. As Mrs. Stevevic indicated in her meeting of safety, this is for premium pay for our safety forces. And in order for them to be paid immediately, we are going to have to vote on this new amended piece of legislation this evening after our meeting of the whole. Thank you for finishing that for me. Do I have a motion to pull this piece of legislation out of our committee?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Mrs. DeBevick. Do I have a second? Mrs. Angela? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Then we have pending legislation, which we won't be voting on tonight, but we have, well, it's the one that I just mentioned, the appropriation for personal services, the appropriation amendment.
We are gonna vote on
I beg your pardon?
that. Aren't we having a special legislative to vote on that?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
So it's still pending. We didn't vote
Yeah.
on it yet. Okay, then the next piece of pending legislation is, it's on here, passed, authorized payment for Ohio Edison utilities payment, and that's in the amount of $6,911.26. Did we already pass that?
Yes, those are passed.
Yeah, these are
Yeah,
passed.
she has
So,
written
yeah.
passed. So we just have
anyway,
one piece of pending.
Yeah, we just have one piece of pending legislation. Do we have any miscellaneous discussion for finance? And I want to thank Mrs. DeBevick for bringing forth the ordinance request, and also for giving us the flow chart. As you said, probably a lot of the people on council had never seen that before. And I would keep it if I were you, keep it with your council information. So hearing no miscellaneous discussion, do I have a motion to adjourn? Or you wanted?
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, okay. Motion made by Mrs. Angeloff and seconded by Mrs. DeBevick, and we are adjourned at 7:20 PM.
Okay, that concludes our committee reports, committee meeting, excuse me. We'll take a 2-minute break, and then we'll get right into our committee of the whole meeting after a presentation.
Harm? Yep. No harm.
It doesn't matter, we went over them already one week, so.
Yeah.
That's why you didn't say anything.
They made some good points too, so.
And then I signed.
kind of why I'm like-
I like the color coding. Yeah, I know, me too.
That's for it.
I'm a color coded person.
and me and Excel are best buddies.
You are, I'm taking an Excel class because I'm done struggling. I just started.
But it all,
I even did the Excel, I did a membership Excel spreadsheet for the VFW for the coming
What's
year.
that?
so-
Oh,
And I color coded
thank
them,
you.
yeah. I figure if Monty and
Thank you
Dennis
so
have to
much.
do it.
I don't have mine with me.
No, that's
I
fine.
have, yeah, I have
You gave
them.
me the other ones back. I was getting ready to leave.
Yeah, and I
looked
have
over
some
my
more.
stand and I was like, can't forget
Thank
this.
you, thank you so much, and I looked a lot of these up too. Okay, thank you.
Are you looking for Kit
I
Kats?
thought I saw one.
There was one, I think it got nabbed earlier, there was a Kit Kat, there's a Hershey's, it's a Hershey's.
He's only a Kit Kat eater.
It's like a Kit Kat without a wafer.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
I've never seen you eat anything but a Kit Kat.
Sneak it for shit.
I gotta get that more chocolate, I haven't. But I've been trying to, like, I have, trying to get rid of the Halloween stuff and get the Christmas candy, but I have a different candy district. I went to, it's called Happy Tales. And it's the thrift shop that funds the Humane Society. It's down in Merriman Valley. Judge Spicer volunteers down there. I dearly love that woman. Anyway, I went and got myself a little tree, and then I got purple and white lights for it. Put up in the office. I think I spent like all of $10. Christmas candy dishes, Christmas.
This one was not. I read the
Wait to
whole
see our tree.
I did too.
Purple and white lights and all sorts of masquerade.
No, she sent me, she had some one that, the one she sent me was about,
She had the color.
Well, she just sent it today,
yes.
but this was in our mail.
Oh, I didn't have that in my mailbox. I wonder if she removed it, because
I was,
I was gonna say, no, the one that she sent us, I read.
doesn't make any sense.
I used to have all the old.
So it was just a different assembly. The 131st is what we have, and it's actually the 134th.
Gotcha.
So, anyway.
We've got masks everywhere in the house.
Masks.
Why you're on masks?
Where was I at? Home Goods.
I was by your house the other day.
Home Goods had a whole bunch.
I was, Snyder. It was like a one block thing. So it detoured me, so I just went all over and just was looking around.
I was like,
I wanted the coconut one, but then I'll be.
I thought I saw a Kit Kat and got all excited.
I got Smarties.
Oh, that's way too much sugar.
I see a giant one.
Start looking, I'm gonna start looking. Carol and
I what?
Have any from Democrats?
No.
But I have. I'm gonna do it.
All right.
You know I will. Hey, somebody already tried to eat my receipt.
Or there. Okay, let's get started.
30 days.
Smart man, smart man.
Is that gonna go first, or?
What does that mean? I have to get the brush thing from your phone. It's a,
Okay, before we go into our committee meeting, we're going to have a presentation from DS Architects about some redevelopment downtown, which is this building here. I'm all for it.
all right, thank you, Council President. So I want to give, we're going to break this up into different segments, so I'm going to give a little historical perspective to this building. We've all driven by this building thousands of times. You may not be able to see it all that clear, but closer to the edge over here. There's a building kind of sandwiched in the middle there. That's 467 West Tusk. Former Barberton Herald was there at one time. I think the printing press is still in the basement, right? So the city of Barberton acquired that in 2014. There were some property maintenance issues. The only person we could trace to that building lived in California, said, don't have the means to clean it up. I'm not coming back to Ohio. I believe they were elderly. Don't hold me to that. Said, just take it off my hands. So we took it. When you have site control, there's a lot you can do, right? So we knew it was sandwiched between the Boilermakers Union Hall and the former Cox Medical Building. Then we started investigating the building and looking into that. And then moving forward a few years, 459 West Tusk, the Cox Medical Building, was acquired in December of 2018 by this. Prior to that, it was the Land Bank of Summit County acquired it. Then we acquired it, the city did in 2018, end of 2018. So we were looking at this, this block. How do we connect West Tuscarawas Avenue and 2nd Street? We've been doing a lot of development on both of those streets. And this is kind of the brings it all together right there. So we reviewed the interior and exterior of those buildings, worked on different ideas internally here at the city on what we could do. Came to the conclusion that due to some of the challenges associated with these buildings, whether it was the age, not having the expertise to address some of these things, there's a huge grade change between West Tuscarawas Avenue and the alley to the north of the buildings. And these buildings were built in a time period where there's common walls, shared walls. So if you tear one building down, you can tear it separate from the other buildings, but it's very, very difficult, which increases the price as well. and a lot of the floor joists were connected. Again, not impossible to demo one versus the other, but it's easier to demo the whole thing. So those are some of the challenges we looked at. Talked to the Boilermakers Union Hall. They did not want to move or sell or anything. They like where they're at. They've reinvested in their building, and but they are connected to these buildings. So we had the thought that we were going to demo these. We knew it would be expensive. Did not have a plan, but you know, it's a blighted structure. Let's take it down with no plan to move forward. Then you know, we had some change with employees throughout the city, and then here comes Mr. Hunt and said, I got a crazy idea for you, Mayor. So I'll turn it over to Trevor from that standpoint, but that's kind of the historic pieces on how the city acquired those two buildings. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. So, as the mayor mentioned, my crazy idea, and I thought maybe it wasn't so crazy because I working in the planning profession, go to a lot of planning conferences, see how things are progressing in other cities throughout not only the state but throughout the country. And after seeing the building, when you see it from the street, you don't see the monstrosity that it is. It's the developers are here; they can tell you the total square footage, but it's much bigger than it appears from the street. And I can see why the demolition costs for this building would be so exorbitant. But you know. The way when I went through the building, I took a step back and I said, what are other cities doing here? If we, the city of Barberton, we have great bones here in our city. If we want to redevelop our historic core, we have to be very intentional about it. And I kind of viewed this as a tool to get to where we need to be, hopefully across the finish line, and hoping to restore not only this buildings but other buildings in our downtown. So initially, I was looking at state and federal tax credits for this project, and one of the ways to do that is to implement a national register district. Now, we here at the city of Barberton actually already have one of those. It's fairly small in stature. Over the past year, we've reached out. We've gotten 2 grants through the state of Ohio and the certified local governments to expand our national register district. That's we've hired a consultant, all paid for through grants from the state. That will be enacted upon this February. Hopefully it's certified through the National Parks Interior, the Secretary of the Parks. Again, we need to be intentional about redevelopment, and my goal from the get-go after seeing this building was not only to move forward with the National Register District, but also to seek development opportunities for this. So late last fall, we put out a request for proposals for the redevelopment of this building. Those responses were due back last winter, and ever since, I think last February or March, we've been working with this development team that we have with you tonight, Dana Noel, Rich Morehouse, DS Architects. They've put together this proposal. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Rich and his team to talk more about this specific project. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Trevor, and thank you, Council. Thank you for the privilege of inviting us here tonight to talk about this project. I've been in the real estate arena for almost 20 years now. I've been a part of some projects that have been really successful, and I've been a part of some projects that have not been successful at all. And so in my career, what I've noted about projects that have been successful is that there was usually a good business case centered in data. And I think, you know, if you look at this building and you think, wow, what is this? You know, in real estate, it's not what is, it's what could be, right? So looking at the market data in conjunction, you know, kind of use the market data to look at the highest and best use of the property. You know, what is this property going to be? What can it be given its constraints? Its size, you know, its site size, its location within Barberton. You know, we looked at traffic counts, population, household sizes, that kind of thing. And we looked at what existed in the community already. When we were first approached about this opportunity by DS Architects, they kind of got word of the RFP. They thought, working with them in other capacities, they knew that we were creative and ultimately that we were willing to, go outside of the box to unlock the potential of properties. And so we worked through an extremely iterative process with them, kind of figuring out what could be. And it's a little bit of a challenge, but I think that if you look at what you see before you, we made a lot of good progress, and there's still more progress to be made, and it's going to take not only us, but a lot of other folks in the community, because this isn't just for us, quite the opposite, it's for the community. Because as the mayor said, this property where it's located at the intersection of Tusk and Worcester, where there used to be a bridge that went across there, it's highly visible from Worcester Road and Robinson, and it's with that paint job, it kind of sticks out. so our goal, our intent is to transform this disinvested property that's on a disinvested block, in a disinvested area, just plant the seed and cultivate it so that it grows into something special that produces a benefit for the community. And our approach is, our intent isn't to cannibalize the demand for existing business and services, but to take note of what exists and kind of build on them. As the mayor said, and as we noted, I don't live in Barberton. I've been in Barberton over the years, through the YMCA and my wife's employment and such. But, one thing we took note of is the substantial historic building stock along Tuscarawas and then 2nd Avenue. There's a lot of good local businesses there that provide good, solid foundation for economic development opportunity. And this development as we see it, as we have envisioned it. So, I'm just getting started. So, you may think, why is this guy all wound up about this project? And I think I am wound up about it because I've spent a lot of time on it. I've done a lot of homework, and I've been around Barberton, and I kind of see the what could be, and like the templates for my what could be thinking. You can observe them all throughout the country and all throughout Northeast Ohio now, right? The resurgence that's happened in Cleveland and in pockets of Akron and in Canton, what happened there? What happened there is they went from the what is to the what could be, and it takes a group of people working passionately together to get there. And it's not easy, but it can be done. Our vision that we developed here is done how it is according to a process. We looked at what is legally permissible here at the site, what is physically possible, what is economically feasible, and also what is ultimately the best financial prospects for the site. It's easy to say, oh, you could do that there, and then without data, and then you kind of wind up in the same situation like 10 years later. I've seen it happen, right? I think we've all seen it happen. So we kind of intentionally didn't go that direction. While there are challenges nearby, ultimately the base is significant, it is substantial, and it presents the opportunity to rebuild and reinvest on solid foundations. And so our goal is to develop an appropriately scaled mixed-use vision that will provide housing, commercial business space, a small entertainment venue, and parking precisely where it needs to be to help give downtown Barberton and its citizens another place where they can be together, socialize, eat, shop, work, live, and be entertained. Be together. And we found that what the neighborhood needs most right here at this location is a program for the property that, again, given what exists, connects the community more with a towpath trail, Lake Anna, in the walkable business corridors along Second and West Tusk, and attracts and provides a place for residents to gather or shop, related to the recreational activities along the Towpath Trail or Lake Anna, the Barberton YMCA, or other places within downtown Barberton. And number 3, maximizes the potential of the commercial traffic along Worcester Road, east and south of the property. There are respectable traffic counts. I'm not sure how savvy you are with traffic counts and what they mean for real estate, but along Worcester, like just southeast, there's a traffic count of 12,000 vehicles per day, which if you look at other successful developments that have been undertaken, they're in similar types of locations. Above 10, is kind of a good threshold, but we're at about 12, which is good. If you look at the successful developments that have happened in communities like Lakewood, and other communities, they're between like 10 and 11. Here we have 12, so it's good. The site, I don't know if you know, it has a walk score of 65 and a bike score of 60, which means that some errands can be accomplished on foot for the people who would live or stay here. And, I just envision like bike or tourism or, runners, who would run, stay here, come in, go down to Ignite, come back, visit other gems in the community and make a weekend out of it, or a week. Maybe they'll stay, who knows? But you got to start somewhere. We looked at the data that I was talking about. There's a significant unmet demand, as we found, for the types of retailers and other occupiers for the commercial portion of the property, based on demographic and retail sales data. The data's out there, but you have to dig for it or pay for it, and I subscribe to the services, so I have access to that data. And there's also a significant demand for small-scale, non-traditional, short-term, furnished apartment living, given community resident demographics and levels of human activity, such as relocations, changes in family situations, or you sell your house before you build or buy something else. You need a place to stay. So this would, in effect, offer people, opportunity to stay within the community as opposed to going to Green or Copley, Fairlawn, who knows where else. They could stay here, which is, I think, positive. And so, all right, so, let me see. And one of the things we're trying to do is establish the right mix of users. Some of the retailers that we've been talking to so far to this point have been shoe stores. I mean, that might be obvious to you because I've been talking about the Towpath Trail, Lake Anna and YMCA, right? I mean, you got to walk there, or you could, or run there. So what do you need? You need shoes, right? But what else could you tie into that? You could tie in desserts, coffee. There's a great coffee establishment here, but if you locate it in a more commercially trafficked area, those people kind of want to go in and out as opposed to kind of sit down, But if you throw in another layer like a healthy beverage or smoothie place, you can kind of start to see, you can piece some things together, like different people could go there for different reasons, but agree to meet at one single place and, shop or eat there and then depart from there, or they can meet there and then go on the trail, or, there's a whole plethora of avenues of activity, at this spot. It's at a good nexus. So, I don't know if you guys have been thinking about the site like I have, but I'm excited. but yeah, I'll just say one more thing before Eric comes up. But just to kind of reiterate what the Mayor said, the vision for this project, provides a vital keystone within an attractive area of Barberton, sustained by vibrant buildings housed within appealing historic buildings. And as visioned, this keystone links West Tusk, Worcester Road, the Towpath Trail, and Lake Anna by appealing to existing residents, you know, and I think the potential is beyond that. I think if we build this special place, we'll get people coming in from outside the community, like I talked about earlier, so. But, thank you. Eric.
Right. Thanks, Rich. I don't know if everyone can see that or these boards, but I have a couple handouts that I printed. I didn't know. These a little closer to it.
One more.
As Rich mentioned, I'm Eric Rose with DS Architecture. I'm the Director of Design there, and I head up our Historic Preservation Adaptive Reuse Studio. So old buildings like this that are underutilized are where I come in. So the what could be is where I thrive. You know, envisioning new life for these types of projects, I think is really really meaningful for communities, and it's part of my passion. So you guys are probably pretty familiar with this image that you're seeing on the screen. That's kind of the way it looks today. And I guess I'll look to you to help me flip through the slides here. But maybe what I'll do, I'll quickly kind of orient you to the site. I think we're all pretty familiar with it, but just to kind of highlight some of the things that Rich had mentioned. You know, the yellow circle there is sort of that site that we're looking at, just on the east side of downtown, right off Worcester Road, which Rich talked about being a really, really busy corridor, and then also being closely connected to the towpath and other pedestrian things. So I have a couple slides here that sort of show that. I think you guys kind of get it, but that's kind of what we're looking at there, right? So it's just on the edge of downtown. Really great opportunity to sort of bookends that downtown neighborhood. You know, it's that last opportunity as you're leaving town, or the first welcoming kind of storefront that you see as you come into downtown. So we see that as a huge opportunity. This is looking at it across, you know, over on the towpath, looking at it. So, you know, that side of the building, historically, I had a chance to pay a visit to the historical library and look at some old photos, and that side of the building has always been painted with something, a mural of some sort, or when it was a business, I believe it was a Chevy car dealership at one point, so it had a large mural on the side as sort of a billboard to the business. But, you know, we see that as honestly the first welcoming moment for someone that's entering downtown from that towpath. This is looking out toward Worcester Road. I'm sure you're familiar with the site here. And some other existing conditions. So, you know, the sidewalk, as Rich mentioned, it's really walkable downtown, lots of great amenities. You know, it's just on the other side, that parking lot, so plenty of parking as well. And that alleyway on the back of the building, you know, at first glance sort of seems like a negative attribute. I'll circle back to that in a little bit. That actually could be an opportunity for us. Another view here of downtown, just kind of looking at, again, what Rich mentioned, like what is, how do we build off of what is already here? With this kind of blank slate that we have. So here's kind of a bird's eye view of it, looking at it from the southeast. So West Tusk there on the bottom left of the screen, and you know, we're operating right now just within the footprint of the existing building. You know, we're not proposing additions or any demolition, but kind of taking that existing envelope of the building and really trying to re-envision how it could be utilized. So. Reactivating the street front with some storefronts, obviously, some awnings and some texture goes a long way to really bring some life to this, you know, the facade. And then looking at the east side of it as well, you know, we talked about that being a billboard, but there's also an opportunity there to open that side up potentially with some storefronts, with some windows, turn that into another extension of that pedestrian landscape. So this view that we're looking at here is kind of the basement of it, and it's a few places here. If you get lost, we can kind of circle back, but this is looking at the basement level of that building. So on the far left there is the Boilermakers. That's kind of that grayish green block. The blue is the basement of the Herald building. Am I saying that? Yep. And then so the red is, believe it or not, there's a parking kind of garage underneath there that I'm not sure exactly what it was used for, probably something to do with the dealership. But we see that as an opportunity for underground parking. You know, if you have residents staying here or tenants that use it as a business use, could be a place to receive deliveries, could be a place to park vehicles out of the snow. You know, as we witnessed today, it's already that time of year, unfortunately. But we see this as a huge opportunity. And if not car parking, then, storage for the business uses, other types of service entries to the building. And there's that garage door that I'm sure you're familiar with that goes out toward Worcester Road there. So we have kind of an off the main road access already that could be re-envisioned. So this is kind of looking at that. It's sort of isometric view, sort of three-dimensional. Sometimes they're helpful, sometimes they're confusing, but it's here for us to reference if we need to. This is looking at one concept for the main floor. Again, we have lots of ideas as to what that could be, but this is one concept that looks at sort of, I hate to use the word food court, but sort of a communal space like Rich was mentioning. You have a place that meets, a place that people can meet, and then retail establishments that sort of are attached to that. So it turns into a little bit more than just a storefront that you walk up to, but maybe a place to eat, a place to gather, a place to do some shopping, that sort of thing. And that could extend to that exterior area as well. There's some outdoor parking that's on the roof of that parking structure now that we see being a great asset for a few parking spaces. Folks that are coming in to grab a cup of coffee or a smoothie or something of that nature. Maintaining a few of those spaces could be a good idea, but then maybe also providing some exterior seating or some bike parking or other amenities for the community, on that end of town. Again, the 3D view here that kind of gives you a little bit more understanding there of how that exterior space might work. That garage door is down, right? It kind of drops down below as you come off Worcester. So you could, maintain all those exterior spaces and still have access for parking. This is looking at the second floor, and as Rich mentioned, maybe these are furnished apartments, maybe they're, maybe they're rentals, but the nice thing is you get a good mix, and they all have access to the exterior with windows, so, you're not, a lot of times with these old buildings, you run into the situation where you have such deep floor plates that you can't get natural light, but the nice thing is that atrium space, kind of the hallway that goes horizontally across the screen, currently, if you've seen photos of it, it's kind of open to the air, but we see maybe that as an opportunity to do it correctly and keep it airtight, but then allow light into that space, so it turns into, instead of just a dark hallway like you'd see in a hotel or something, turns it a little bit more of a communal space, an area that someone might sit outside and enjoy the light, a place for people to kind of meet and gather if appropriate. And again, a 3D view here that kind of tells the story. You can start to see how that hallway sort of orients the units. So this is where the what could be gets a little more interesting. We start looking at some concepts of what type of establishments might want to be in this building. We see that basement of the one building being an opportunity for sort of a nightclub or sort of a speakeasy or a jazz bar or something of that nature that really could pay tribute to the history of the building. With the printing presses and a lot of that culture that people want. The authenticity of that space could really be celebrated in an interesting way. And maybe that could feed the upper floors as well. So here we're looking at some of the retail establishments. So Rich mentioned, maybe a shoe store, Second Soul, or something of that nature that might, attract people that are interested in the towpath and some of those functions. We also see that the alleyway space, potentially being an extension of the businesses. So whether it's facing Worcester or it's back toward the alleyway, some exterior seating. Doesn't take much to activate those spaces, just providing a place for lighting and for seating. And next thing you know, you have this kind of indoor-outdoor space, which, as people are driving by, kind of attracts their attention and builds some energy around it. And that image on the bottom right, the image on the bottom right kind of shows that communal gathering space that Rich was mentioning. So here's kind of a three-dimensional view of it, jumping back to keeping the idea of the building more or less staying in its existing condition, just refreshing the exterior, looking at maybe that eastern facade as an opportunity for more storefronts, more access, just depending on how that concept lays out. Here's looking at it from Worcester. Again, right now that wall is just a kind of a solid mass, but maybe there's an opportunity to soften that up, make it more attractive as people are driving by. And then again, you have that parking below so that you don't have to sacrifice the activity for the sake of parking, which a lot of times is the case. And here's kind of an idea we have. The Magic Marketplace is an idea that we were kind of bouncing around as a name just to kind of get us excited. But this starts to show the existing structure turning into this new idea, and just sort of the unknown of what it could be presents lots of opportunities for us. And so these are some other concepts that we've seen, you know, in Northeast Ohio and throughout America that have taken similar spaces and really re-envisioned them. The top left there is Acorn Alley in Kent, which is, you know, another really kind of leftover space that they've turned into a really dynamic shopping area. People gather, students, people from the town, and tourists alike. East 4th Street in Cleveland is another good example. Then there's some examples of markets. You know, if we had that gathering space, that starts to, you know, attract the type of people that would do some shopping and spend some time in these spaces. But the common thing here is that you have the historic structures and you add that new energy to it. You know, it doesn't take much, just some lighting, some properly and thoughtfully designed spaces really go a long way. Here's some other ideas. The top right there, you know, the Umbrella Alley in Louisville, another good example of, you know, an alleyway that probably really wasn't used very much, but now, you know, there's a focal point. It brings some attention to that space, and now there's businesses that are doing a little more and are probably getting noticed more than they used to. Again, bicycles, other types of infrastructure that could kind of tie into this space and the type of people it might attract. Here's some other examples of outdoor spaces, right? Just, you know, whether it's something with lighting, whether it's with vegetation, outdoor structures, just something that provides a little shelter, but really creates a place for people to gather. And that's all I've got, but I'd be happy to share more ideas with you. Again, as Rich mentioned, we're really excited for the opportunity. And maybe I'll turn it over to Dana. I don't know if you have anything you want to add at this point, or you're just here to answer questions.
No, I think you've done a good job, and you know, I think I'd be happy to participate in any questions that people might have.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
When do you start?
What was that?
When do you start?
As soon as possible.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
I like the name, the Magic Marketplace. I like that a lot.
Yeah, that happened during COVID. Because we were like, just kind of trying to figure out, what are we gonna do? And then we just had a light bulb moment. What's the protocol?
Councilor DeBevick.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing this evening. So is this a joint venture since the city owns the building? How does this involve city council?
Yes, I guess if I can speak, we envision this as a public-private partnership. You know, one of the things that I picked up in the earlier parts of the meeting is the desire for transparency and accountability, and that's our hope, that's our intent, and that's how we've been conducting ourselves, you know, as we've progressed to this point. But yes, there is a high degree of disinvestment, and if you look at this location, it would seem to be a speculative place to do something like this. And there's no seeming, it is a speculative place. And so, fortunately, there are tools like, historic tax incentives at the federal level. There's some grants out there that Trevor and the mayor have been kind of putting us in the connection with people with Jobs Ohio. There's Vibrant Grants and other people throughout the community. To this point, I've been meeting with folks that are on the Kiwanis board, and other folks, just to increase awareness and kind of get input. What do they see? We're committed up to the iterative part of the process, but yeah, to answer your question, it's a public-private partnership, and we have an agreement that we are working towards. But,
Thank you. Just a ballpark, if I may, how much would a rehabilitation like this cost?
Yeah.
Just a ballpark, nothing I'm holding you to here.
Yeah, that's the trick with historic buildings. There's what you think it is, and then there's what it ends up being. We ran costs, and just based on our experience, Dana, he's done a lot of projects. I don't want to say too many because I feel if I say the number, I kind of date Dana, but we estimate right around $3 million, probably north of that a little bit. Given what's happening with COVID and some of the commodity prices, man, it's tough. You know, but the last time we ran the numbers, it was about 3 million.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Love the idea, it's a great idea. Great for the city. Now, was there a purchase price that you guys purchased from the city for this building?
Yeah, that was negotiated, and I think ultimately, as far as a purchase price, I think it's nominal, to be sure, because that's part of the give back to the community. I think that the city, in keeping the price point low, is helping us to manage the costs, you know, so that we can attract retailers at the right price point. Because, you know, ultimately, retailers, businesses, they have to be able to sell enough product to pay their rent, otherwise they're not there very long. So I think with the small things like the nominal purchase price, that'll help to compress our cost to the point where, you know, we can afford to take rents that can be appropriate for the community. You know, like the community can sustain the retailers in there and so on and so forth. So.
Well, what was the purchase price?
On the LOI, I think it was, well, we haven't consummated it yet, and that doesn't include the sweat equity that we're putting in, but I think it's $1.
$1? Okay.
Yeah.
And then,
That's common for projects like this.
Right.
Again, that hasn't come to council or anything like that, but we're working on that.
Yeah.
Some more documents.
and for that $3 million, how much is it, are you looking for grant money from the state and federal? I know.
Yeah, those work like for the federal historic tax credits, that's based on the allowable cost for that. That starts out at 20%, and you get it 5% every year. Is it 25? I forget. It's 25. It's 5% every year for 5 years, and so that helps to take some of the sting out of, sting and risks of working with a historic building, just because there's always what you think you know, and then there's what reality is. And with historic buildings, you ultimately usually get into a lot more than what you think you get into.
And, we've worked with John Ohio and Team Neo. Councilman Jaber, you had a post on Facebook. We were standing in the alley.
Oh yeah, our Facebook post, yes.
Yeah, so that was with Team Neo. We took a tour of the building. They were very impressed. So waiting to hear back from them. So keep your fingers crossed.
This would be great. Yeah, this would be great. I just don't want to see your company. It's called KJK, correct?
Yeah, that's the law firm that I'm affiliated with. Yeah.
Now, how much are you guys going to take out of your guys' pocket for this job?
Yeah, the goal is to, usually we hope to not lose money. Meaning, like, so far I probably I hesitate to really talk about it. Like, I know we were talking about like this project that has really it doesn't have any budget right now because we don't have any money in the project to pay for costs. Like, we're kind of pursuing this on a speculative basis, like all the research and time and the data that I put into this project. I can total up for you, it's probably right now about 50 grand. The architecture fees, I mean, like Eric's time, I'm sure it's about that, and Dana's time, it adds up as well. Like, you won't see a receipt for that, but ultimately, we've been putting a lot of work into it, and I guess what you see is what we have produced so far.
It's similar to the other week, several weeks ago, when we had the two gentlemen here about the housing development. This is just to introduce the project to council and let you know kind of where we started and where we are today. So, word up.
I think it's a great idea. We appreciate you coming down. I mean, I had another business, like he said, a Facebook post. The business right behind it was State Street Tire. He wanted to purchase the business, the building itself. It was the same time it was brought up, so this is way better for the city, and hopefully it works out, and hopefully we get the grant money. You guys get the grant money through the federal and a lot of good stuff. But we had a business who was willing to purchase the property right away and expand his business, so demolition was around $200,000, I believe, Mr. Hunt?
That's my understanding.
Yeah, demolition was gonna be around $200,000, and the gentleman was willing to invest that money to expand his business. So Like I said, hopefully it works, and we're shooting for a good result from this.
Yeah.
And I just don't want to see that business owner behind us, behind you guys, who's waited and they want to purchase the property. And when you guys looking to start or complete this this building?
Yeah, as soon as we get our cap stack lined up, that'll like, you know, getting the tenants signed, you know, letters of interest, that'll be catalytic to getting construction financing, just like anything else. And so it's kind of a chicken or the egg type thing with this kind of project, given its location. It's not, you know, it's not in like downtown Cleveland or anything, you know. And so we've been kind of just working processes, you know, interviewing prospective tenants, you know, talking to different brokers as we go along, just trying to work the process, and we keep getting closer and closer and closer, and it'll happen. Hopefully we can do it next spring.
Did you say there's rooftop parking and underground parking?
Oh.
Or did I misunderstand?
Yeah, it's like street level, but it's kind of, yeah, it's a street level, and then there's the part below grade.
Not on the roof of the building, but.
Okay, very good. And then, according to the renderings, I realize they're in the infant stage, but how many parking spots do you anticipate that we, just approximately?
I've got about 28 underground in this scenario, but, you know, that's just kind of the first step. It'll probably be a little less as you get into construction.
And again, nothing, we're open for this, and hopefully this works out, and we're happy you guys decided to come to Barberton. Mr. Trevor Hunt did a lot of hard work with this, and the mayor, and we're open for this, so thank you for doing this. Great presentation. We appreciate you guys.
With all these masks on, it's really hard to hear what all is going on, but the suites that appear to be on the second floor, did you say those would be apartments?
Yeah, I think they're going to be furnished, you know, and
Okay.
you know, they're going to be furnished. They're going to exist as that. Now, who is going to occupy them? You know, I think the most straightforward thing that I can come up with are people in transitory situations. Maybe it's some folks that come into town associated with work on contracts at BWXT, or maybe residents with the hospital, or maybe folks in the community. You know, maybe there's somebody who'd be crazy enough to want to live there like year round all the time, you know, but I mean, it's going to be a fun spot.
Would it be somewhat like corporate apartments? Like,
Exactly.
say that BWXT had a space, and when they brought people into town, that is where they would reside while they were in town? Is
Yeah,
it the hospital?
Yeah, I think, like, if you look at what happens in other markets with similar properties, especially when there's not a hotel one close by, I think that makes
Right.
a lot of complete sense.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. I think, you know, yeah, we agree.
Yes, thank you.
Any elevator?
Um,
Any plans for an elevator?
Elevators are really expensive.
Yeah.
So,
That's something we'll work through, you know, it's an expense, but if the reward to the risk is worth it.
Because if you park in the bottom parking lot, then you want to go upstairs.
Yep, that would be
And if you have luggage.
I have one more question, thank you. So, just for clarification, is the city's portion, financial obligation, just the buildings, or also renovation?
we would do the work for the renovation. Dana, actually, our team would do the work for the renovation. I guess it's a team because I forgot Eric's sitting there, of course. But yes, as far as the work, yes, that's how we envision it. And let me see. I think that's the question you're asking, right?
So, yeah, so if we're looking at $3 million, once the, just rough number, right? And we turn over the building to you for $1, that's our financial obligation as a city, or do we have other financial obligations for the project?
We're kind of still working through that, you know, that's, what the important factor is the grants, you know. The more grants that have come in for this project, you know, it changes that capital stack. So we're kind of reviewing all that. This is just kind of an initial meeting. So we're going to continue working through the next few weeks. Hopefully we hear something, if not into next year, but hopefully very soon. And then, anything like that, we come back to council and we'd update you on that one.
So, Mr. Hunt will be, the city of Barberton will be applying for grants?
Jointly. We will
Jointly
work
with-
with the development team to apply to Jobs Ohio, CNEO for the Vibrant Communities Grant.
Yeah.
We started to work through that process, so.
Yeah, we submitted the initial pre-vetting application, and it was well received. We just have to get to the space commitment threshold of 30% of the project. And, we've only recently kind of got to the LOI stage, so we're a little behind. We have some work in front of us. But I think, given the positives of the projects, I think we've unlocked the opportunity here. We just need to keep pushing forward in the process and give the community its buildings back, essentially.
Well, thank you guys for coming in. Appreciate your time.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
It's interesting.
You got time, grab a beer at Ignite or M&M.
There you go.
Get some good beer down there.
You guys like to keep another set of these as well?
That should be good. Thank you.
I guess that was for the 1,000 feet. 1,000 feet of park.
Okay, let's get this meeting moving here.
Yeah.
Today is Monday, November 15th, 2021. This is Barberton City Council. This is a committee of the whole meeting. I call this meeting to order at 8:10 p.m. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, citizens addressing council. We have one letter that Lori is going to read.
I forwarded this to you guys. Dear City Council, as a homeowner in the city of Barberton, I wholeheartedly endorse the amendment to Ordinance 84-2006 to 365 days. In addition, I urge you to increase the fines for such nuisance violations in order to force landlords to have their tenants comply. Direct hits to the wallets of these problem properties is the only way to fix it, in my opinion. In addition to increasing fines, I urge you to increase or at minimum maintain the landlord fees for all rentals in the city. Take a look at Lakewood, Ohio's city code on property maintenance for some more ideas on how to implement and enforce beautification. On the block surrounding 17th Street Northwest, what was once a cute old neighborhood when we moved here in 1998 has become rather blighted from the change to owner-occupied homes to mostly rentals. Please come and visit me and view my neighbors at 79 and 75 17th Street Northwest. Both properties have trash and debris continuously draped all over the yard. On 79 17th Street, currently there is a discarded mattress on the front porch. In addition to the junk laying around, there is a fallen tree leaning against 79's house onto the garage behind it on 16th Street Northwest that has been there for at least 2 years. They have a race car and motorcycle in which they rev the engines of both incessantly day and night. They have 2 100-pound pit bulls that growl at me through the fence or as they hang out in the front or side windows. Those are the visible concerns. I also have other concerns of illegal activities. 75 has a garage that is literally falling down. The property is no longer occupied, and there is a lot of spillover from 79 and the shared driveway. Junk litters the whole backyard. I have called the city building department about these properties regularly, but nothing changes. We call the police on the noise and other nuisances, but nothing changes. What will it take to get this fixed? Again, handing out fines for constant violations is one way to return Barberton to the city, to a city of pride. Hiring sufficient staff at the building department would help as well. Please call me or stop by if you would like to discuss this in more detail. I look forward to seeing this important change to our city code. Sincerely, Deborah, I apologize if I murder it, Koprek, now, 81 17th Street Northwest.
Joyce, have you ever talked to her?
I've driven by and they weren't home the day I went by when I got the first letter. I went by that day and she wasn't home.
Could you follow up on that?
I certainly will.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. President,
Go ahead.
I think that
Charlie's got work on
Yes,
both of
has
those
been working
properties
on those,
too.
yeah.
I forwarded this email to him as well, since it referenced the building department, I forwarded it to him.
Right,
Yes,
I had
and
also.
I think that he is working on that particular, and I drove by also.
Right.
Yeah, but.
I believe you. But the mattress on the porch, it is on the porch. I agree that it needs to come off, but I'm not going up to take it off, and the trash won't take it if they don't cover it with plastic.
Right.
So I'm sure they're not,
Going to do that.
well, they're not anxious to anyway.
Okay, we'll get right into our committee reports. First up is Mrs. Angeloff with Planning, Annexations, and Codes.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Planning, Annexation, and Codes Committee met this evening, 6:05. All members were present, along with all council members and guests as noted on my sheet. We have no new legislation, but we have two pending legislations for a second reading on both of those on November 22nd. First one is an ordinance 123, 2021, amending Barberton Codified Ordinance, Chapter 1444, Permits and Fees, an ordinance amending Section 1444.15, General Permit Fees, and declaring an emergency. There was no questions or comments on that. I think everybody understands we have to raise it, so that will be part of our operating fees. The second one is a resolution, number 124, 2021, various types of businesses, a moratorium. A resolution imposing a moratorium until the adoption of the new development code on the issuing of zoning permits for used car lots, mini warehouse, limited indoor storage, and dollar stores within the city of Barberton, with the exception of permitting mini warehouses within industrial use I-1, I-2, I-3, or IU zoning districts. The question I had was an end date for the moratorium. This will be answered at the Planning Commission meeting Wednesday at 5:30. They will review this and hopefully they'll come up with the date, and then I can go ahead and present that. And with that, I pass.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Greer with Streets, Sidewalks, and Lighting.
Thank you, Mr. President. Street, Sidewalk, and Lighting met today, November 15th, 2021, at 6:01 PM here in the council chambers. All committee members were present, council members were present, and guests noted on my sheet. There was no request for legislation. There was a couple pieces of miscellaneous discussion. First one, the 2021 road program update. The road program's winding down. Utility adjustments are being completed and should be completed tomorrow. The second thing was AMATS projects are complete with the exception of one of the manhole covers at the intersection of Barber Road and Norton Avenue, and Carvo's going to be taking a look at that. Third thing is, there were some concerns. Well, third thing was about the snow. So yesterday we had our first snowfall, and the crews used less than 12 tons of salt. Mr. Tracy said that we currently have 5 trucks set up for plowing and salting, and the rest of our trucks are set up for leaf collection. However, our trucks are set up in a way that we can change over fast if need be. And the last thing we talked about, or just touched on, was there were some imperfections and concerns regarding Fish Street, and the city will be talking to the contractor and subcontractor, hopefully within the week, to address those concerns. And with that, street, sidewalk, and lighting adjourned at 6:03, and with that I pass.
Thank you. Next up is Ms. Coburn with City Utilities.
Thank you, Mr. Magis. City Utilities met last Monday in the chambers. We had one piece of legislation that we referred to finance. That was an appropriation for the Bentwood package plant elimination and appropriating $100,000 from the unappropriated item of the 517 sewer fund to the capital budget of the sewer fund and declaring an emergency. The second piece of legislation that we had was the disposal of vehicles for the utilities department. They requested permission to use the junk to dispose of 3 pieces of equipment and 3 vehicles deemed no longer needed for any municipal purpose and unfit and unsafe for disposal in any other manner, and declaring an emergency. And with that, I pass.
Thank you. Mrs. DeBevick with Public Welfare and Safety.
Thank you, Mr. President. Public Welfare and Safety met on last Monday, November 8th, 2021, here in council chambers. We had one request for legislation. Well, we had several requests for legislation, I apologize. The first request was a request from the Mayor Judge requesting a resolution supporting the state of Ohio's House Bill 408 addressing the theft and sale of catalytic converters. Emergency wording and 1 reading requested so that if passed, our support can be sent to the state legislature. Along with this, this request for legislation, we also had some conversation regarding a request that was on our agenda a few weeks ago regarding some legislation here, stiffening fines and suspending driver's license, and the law director provided us with the information we needed that we would be unable to do that. Since our meeting, Mrs. Price, she emailed all of us the actual House bill. It has a number now. So she emailed all of that. She emailed it to all of us for us to review, which is actually what we would be supporting with this piece of legislation. So we will be voting on that next week. The second request for legislation was a request from Mrs. Fry, requesting an amendment to Barberton Codified Ordinance 351.5, night parking of commercial vehicles in residential districts, emergency wording requested. This came as a result of an incident that occurred and in Mrs. Fry's ward, and after some conversation with Lieutenant White, they discussed some possible changes to this codified ordinance. We did not call this out of committee because we wanted to touch base further with Lieutenant White, and in addition, Mrs. Miller indicated that because the codified ordinances are separate from the Barberton Development Code, the statement, please refer to Chapter 1210 of the Barberton Development Code for all parking specifications, would not be able to be in there. So we had some conversation about how to word this appropriately, and one of the suggestions was night parking of commercial/recreational vehicles in residential districts as the heading. So we will discuss that further next Monday and hopefully be able to bring that out of committee. We had a piece of pending legislation, ordinance number 115, 2021, titled Amend Ordinance Number 84, 2006, nuisance law. An ordinance amending ordinance number 84, 2006, section 674.02 notice and 674.04 cost of abatement of the Barberton codified ordinances by changing the wording to modify nuisance activities to be calculated using 365 days from the earliest nuisance activity. So we have been discussing this, so this, next week, we will be, is next week the third reading? Or the second reading?
For what was it?
For the nuisance law. Third. Next week is third reading, so we will be voting on that piece of legislation. Thank you. We passed ordinance number 116, 2021, the purchase of police cruisers from Ganley Ford last week. For miscellaneous discussion, we discussed another piece of legislation that had been brought to me regarding sex offenders, and Mrs. Miller weighed in on some of the legalities, and thank you to the planning department for helping us, so we will have some updates on that next week in our safety committee. And with that, public welfare and safety will pass.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Griffin with Rules, Marketing, and Development.
Thank you, Mr. President. Rules, Marketing, and Development met on November 8th. All members present and other guests as noted. We had no requests for legislation to call for. We are still having continued discussion on rule changes. We adjourned at 7:34. With that, I pass.
Thank you. Environmental Health and Social Services, Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. Environmental Health and Social Services met November 15th, 2021 at 6 o'clock. All members were present. The council members also noted and present. We had no new request for legislation, and we had no miscellaneous discussion. We adjourned, sir, at 6:01. With that, I pass.
Thank you. Next up, City Properties, Parks, and Recreation, Mr. Heidi.
Thank you, Mr. President. City Properties, Parks, and Recreation met last Monday, November 8th, 6 p.m. here in council chambers. All members present, plus guests noted. We had one request for legislation, a letter from Councilman Thomas Heidick requesting legislation to create a grant request titled Skate Park Grant Request. The remarks that TMN Associates Phase 2 was complete and the report was going to be coming to the administration very soon. We passed that along to the floor. Excuse me. We had two board appointments. It was for the same person. We voted separately. Ms. Stacy Dooley to the Parks and Recreation Commission to fill the unexpired term beginning immediately and ending at the end of this year, and to a 5-year term beginning the first of next year through the end of 2026. We had no miscellaneous discussion and adjourned at 6:08. With that, I pass.
Thank you. Finance Personnel, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Finance and Personnel met this evening in council chambers. All members were present, as well as all council people and guests as noted on my sheet. We had several requests for legislation, the first being a letter from Mayor Judge requesting legislation acknowledging and giving recognition to the 2021 Barberton football team. We also had a letter from Councilwoman at-large Carla DeBevick requesting legislation to implement a bidding requirement for all professional services over $10,000. We had quite a long discussion about that, and while everyone agreed that the $10,000 would probably have to be raised if we do go forward with something like this, we did not take it out of committee, and we we'll be discussing it at a later time. We also have a piece of legislation referred to us from safety. It is ordinance number 125-2021, which will amend ordinance number 117-2021 with an emergency wording added. 117-2021 was passed in last week's legislative meeting. However, it was noted after it was already passed that the emergency wording was not there, and we are having a special legislative meeting tonight to pass that legislation because it's for the premium pay for our safety forces from the ARPA funds. We have some pending legislation, and it is to authorize the payment for utilities, which was from Mrs. Coburn's committee, and it is to pay a purchase order that pay an invoice that was dated after the purchase order, and we'll be voting on that next week. And we also have in our possession the IAFF Local 329 agreement, and we will be voting on that next week. So I would ask that everyone takes a look at that and asks any questions of Beth or anyone else in administration if you have questions about that particular agreement, because we will be voting on that. Then some of the reports tonight, I wanted to add to the fact that Mrs. Coburn had said that we were making a $100,000 appropriation from the 517 fund for the package plant in Brentwood. And I just wanted to note that the money was actually 50,000 of it was from Norton and 50,000 of it was from Summit County. That's how we attained that money.
Yes.
Then I also wanted to say, Mrs. DeBevick brought up ordinance number 351.05, and we do have a draft in our packet today. So I am hoping we will be voting on that next week. And there's already one amendment that I would like to add to that, and that is to add boats, because I had gotten an email today from Lieutenant White, and there was an incident, and I do have a lot of boats in my neighborhood that are parked on streets, and that is not allowable. And therefore, I do want it to be put into the legislation so that it is clear, because if something is not named specifically, people will argue about the fact that it's not in that ordinance. So I just wanted to clear those 2 points up, and with that, finance will pass.
Thank you. Mayor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since Veterans Day, what a great showing all the way around, and I think Veterans Day weekend offered every season of weather that we had this weekend. The VFW put together a nice event, the Military Honor Roll on Veterans Day, that had an open house at their facility afterwards. I'd like to thank Councilwoman Coburn and Quilts of Valor Foundation for the event they put together at Ignite Brewery on Thursday evening, providing city quilts to city employees who have served. What a tremendous showing of support, and just a great event on Thursday. This weekend, the Beacon Journal had a nice article about downtown, depicting downtown and Lake Anna Park. You know, there's so many positive things going in and around town, and many opportunities that we have in front of us that we really need to capitalize on. It's a shame that there are people on Facebook that want to see the city fail, and I don't understand that. We won't let that happen. Sunday's article is a great depiction of positive things going in town, new jobs, new businesses in town. Tonight's presentation, the presentation of new houses several weeks ago, that proposal, Austin Drive, we talked about townhomes there, Marks downtown, a lot of great things are happening. So we'll keep that alive and moving forward here. Change for Change is this Thursday at the Green Diamond, benefiting the Reynolds Classic. We'll start collecting non-perishables here in a few weeks. That'll run all through December and all through January, benefiting the Salvation Army and Backham, two great organizations here in town. Earlier today, President Biden signed the $1.2 trillion Infrastructure and Jobs Act. So we've already met once last week concerning this before it was signed, after it passed, before it was signed, just to see if there's any inclination on how this might affect Barberton, directly or indirectly. So Nothing's really been released that pinpoints specifics or details of the bill. So we're working with all of our partners to make sure that we have all the information as we move forward. So, things could drop from that perspective or with American Rescue Plan with more specifics here at any time. So unfortunately, the federal government doesn't come out and say on this date, hard and fast date, information will be released. They did provide that hard and fast date for the money to be used on the American Rescue Plan side, but not specifics on how to use it. So we're going to keep lobbying for the use of that money. We're going to continue to try to determine how much we may receive and how much we can use throughout the city. So I'll be reporting back to City Council on that. But if you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to give me a ring or stop in. That's all I have, sir.
Thank you. Okay, anything from the body here? Mr. Jaber.
Thank you, Mr. President. Earlier today, Mrs. Price put all these, put this paperwork on our front of us. It's for the boundaries for 1,000 feet for the parks and towpath. Hopefully you guys can look at it and you can still see there's still some spaces, some homes that they could still live in the city of Barberton, and hopefully we can move forward with this before the end of the year. And also I want to thank the mayor and the city administration for moving forward. You guys are doing an awesome job, and hopefully we keep going the right path. And with that, I pass. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, this meeting is adjourned at 8:34, but don't go anywhere. You have that call letter ready? Okay. I just want to make sure you're ready. Okay. All right. This is a special meeting of the Barberton City Council. Today is Monday, November 15th, 2021. We are in council chambers. Let's see, the time is 8:35. This is a legislative meeting, and the clerk has a letter to read.
Members of council, pursuant to rules of council, a special meeting has been called as follows by Law Director Lisa Okolish-Miller for today, immediately following the committee of the whole, in regards to the American Rescue Plan Fund and the ordinance 125-2021, adding emergency legislation, amending ordinance 117-2021.
Okay. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mrs. Angela.
Here.
Mrs. Coburn.
Here.
Mrs. DeBevick.
Here.
Mrs. Fry.
Here.
Mr. Greer.
Present.
Mr. Griffin.
Here.
Mr. Heidick.
Here.
Mr. Jaber.
Here.
First readings of ordinances.
Ordinance number 125-2021, presented by Mrs. Fry and Mrs. DeBevick. Title: Appropriation Amendment, Personal Services, American Rescue Plant Grant Fund. An ordinance amending ordinance 117-2021 to include emergency wording and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter be suspended.
And Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on suspension.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Fry and second by Mrs. DeBevick to suspend the rule as required by Section 5.10 of the Barberton City Charter. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on suspension.
Mrs. Angela.
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn.
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick.
Yes.
Mrs. Fry.
Yes.
Mr. Greer.
Yes.
Mr. Griffin.
Yes.
Mr. Heidick.
Yes.
Mr. Jaber.
Yes.
Motion to adopt, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of ordinance number 125-2021.
Thank you. And Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to second Mrs. Fry's motion on adoption.
Thank you. Motion was made by Mrs. Fry and second by Mrs. DeBevick to adopt ordinance number 125-2021. Are there any remarks? Clerk, please call the roll on adoption.
Mr. Jaber?
Yes.
Mr. Heidick?
Yes.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mr. Greer?
Yes.
Mrs. Frye?
Yes.
Mrs. DeBevick?
Yes.
Mrs. Coburn?
Yes.
Mrs. Angela?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn? Mrs. DeBevick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I make a motion that we adjourn.
Thank you, and Mr. Heidick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will second the motion to adjourn.
Thank you. It was moved by Mrs. DeBevick and second by Mr. Heidick that we adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned at 8:38.